Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. I remember when I was growing up, there was a question that was making the rounds among us religious types. If you were arrested for being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to convict you? For good or bad, that's not always a comfortable question. The truth is that being a Christian involves the call to live as God would have us live. And that's not always in congruence with the way the world lives. We are called to be moral and upright in the midst of a world that celebrates a code of do what you want and what feels good. It's a topic that is addressed in the tiny book of Jude. This week we are getting an introduction to the tiny books at the back of the New Testament. We are looking at 1 Peter, 2 Peter, Jude, and 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. Yesterday we met the book of 1 Peter, and while it might seem that I should follow that by looking at 2 Peter, we actually need to meet the book of Jude first. Jude is a little book with only one chapter. Nevertheless, there is much discussion about this little book. Jude is very direct as he addresses the issue of false teachers that have infiltrated the church and advises his readers on how to respond. Apparently, these false teachers were saying that truly spiritual people were exempt from any form of moral authority. They claimed that the grace of God liberated them to do as they pleased, and that especially applied to sexual indulgence. Of course, this argument would have been tempting to Christians who were called to live a moral life in the midst of a more permissive pagan society. If this teaching were true, then they could live like everyone else. Jude argues that faith is inseparable from moral obedience to God. That's what we know about this book, and there is much we don't know. The author claims to be Jude, the brother of James, the first leader of the church in Jerusalem. Interestingly, since James was the brother of Jesus, that would make Jude the brother of Jesus also. Why wouldn't you claim that instead of being the brother to James? In addition, there are no indications that he knows about the book of James written by his brother. Since James was the leader of the early church in Jerusalem, perhaps the author of Jude is trying to play on James's authority. The book is also written in well-formed Greek, meaning that it wasn't marketplace language, but that he had been educated in Greek. The author never claims to be an apostle, but it is clear that he has a Jewish background. Some believe that Jude was one of the earliest books of our New Testament to be written, and may reflect the faith that was circulating in the Palestine area. No one knows who this book was written to. So, now I want to turn to 2 Peter. Actually, 2 Peter isn't related to 1 Peter at all. The language, the style of writing, and the theology all differ. The book presents itself as the dying testimony of Peter, spelling out his final witness of the gospel, seeking to safeguard the faith against false teachers. And this is why we looked at Jude first. You see, Jude seems to have been written very early, but 2 Peter seems to have been written very late, probably about the end of the century. We know this because the book refers to a collection of Paul's letters, a written account of the Transfiguration, and also seems to know about 1 Peter as well. Even more significantly, 2 Peter borrows heavily from Jude. Much of what is in Jude is repeated, copied almost word for word in 2 Peter. 2 Peter addresses false teachers in the church who have been denying the second coming of Jesus. This was an ongoing issue. The apostles have died, and Jesus hasn't come back. What does that mean? A second theme is moral and virtuous living. Peter reminds us that God has divine power, and thus God's word is reliable and true. And then he warns that when God speaks of judgment, you can bet it's coming. And along with that come other things too. Jesus, mercy, salvation, and more. To remain with God means to be pious, stable, and righteous. Maybe these books speak well to our time today. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.